All right, everybody. Welcome to the Contextual Christian Church Bible Study, where today we're going to read Second Chronicles chapter 35, verses 11 to 25. I'm going to pray it in. Everybody bow your heads. Father, thank you for getting us on this Bible study today as we're continuing into more of some things that Josiah and Judah and some Levites will get into further in our story. We'll get some good notes out of this. We'll get some lessons out of this. We'll get possibly interesting detail out of this as well. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Matt, can you hear me?
Man, I didn't even get to hear the prayer. All right. I'm telling Josiah
Oh, dude,
that
you want
because of
me
this,
to?
no, it's okay. It's okay. Wasn't meant to be. And Josiah, because of this, telling them that, hey, we're gonna be they'll be asking for a prophetess to get a word from God. And the prophetess telling him that you're gonna be doing well and you're not.
Dang. You hear us?
Response because you put God first. Did you guys hear me?
Half of that.
Okay,
Half.
Josiah doing right by God. That's the summary of last time.
Okay, I got you. Oh man, did you? Yeah, you already switched it over. So, I know the screen says 11 to 16, but what I actually will be reading is Second Chronicles chapter 35, verses 11 to 15. I'm going to give it a couple seconds. Verse 11. And they killed the Passover, and the priests sprinkled the blood from their hands, and the Levites flayed them, and they removed the burnt offerings, that they might give according to the divisions of the families of the people, to offer unto the Lord, as it is written in the book of Moses. And so did they with the oxen. And they roasted the Passover with fire according to the ordinance. But the other holy offerings sod they in pots, and in cauldrons, and in pans, and divided them speedily among all the people. And afterward they made ready for themselves and for the priests, because the priests, the sons of Aaron, were busied in offering of burnt offerings and the fat until night. Therefore the Levites prepared for themselves and for the priests, the sons of Aaron, and the singers, the sons of Asaph, were in their place according to the commandment of David and Asaph and Haman and Yeduthun, the king's seer, and the porters waited at every gate. They might not depart from their service, for their brethren, the Levites, prepared for them. All right. So, first thing I need to get into in my section, well, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I'm still gonna go verse by verse. Talking about killing the Passover, it's just killing the offerings that they had for the Passover, pre-sprinkling the blood, and it just, we talked about that in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, on how they're supposed to have the Passover, how they're supposed to set up the offerings, getting rid of removing the burnt offerings after that, giving it to the different divisions or the different groups of the Levites, different because we already talked about in previous chapters about the different groups of Levites and what they would have, doing it how it was supposed to be done as it was written in the book of Moses. Again, we talked about that in previous chapters. And the rest of it, yeah, no, the rest of it is pretty. No, I don't have to go verse by verse. Basically, what we're reading about is them doing the Passover as it was supposed to be done, dividing it up and spreading it with all the different groups of the Levites. Not only cooking it, through the fire, but boiling it, cooking it through different methods, different ways. And let me reread something real quick. Afterward, they made ready for themselves and for the priests, because the priests, the sons of Aaron, were busied in offering of burnt offerings and the fat until night. Therefore, the Levites prepared for themselves and the priests' sons and Aaron's. And the singers, the sons of Asaph, were in their place according to the commandment of David. And Asaph and Haman and Jeduthun, the king's seer, and the porters waited at every gate. They might not depart from their service, for their brethren, the Levites, prepared for them. So yeah, just more after having setting up all the Passover, setting up the offerings, passing and spreading the offerings that they've been cooking for everybody. At the end of my section, they're talking about everybody in their place as they should be. The singers that are supposed to be set up to sing, they're in their place. The porters, which are security guards waiting at the gates, they're in their place as well. Everybody is in the places that they should be, doing what they're supposed to be doing while Passover's going, or while they're doing the Passover. All right. And that's what I have for my section. Matt, did you hear that whole thing or just parts of it?
I heard enough to know you answered correctly on the explanation.
Okay.
I heard it. Like I cut off a couple times, but it was quick enough, and I maneuvered the truck a little bit. I was able to hear you did it correctly in the explanation. There was not really anything missing. You even brought up about how they did the Passover and everything. Now, the only thing that I would say is actually no, that was pretty much everything. Good job. I'll switch it
You
to the
sound a
next
lot
section.
more you sound a lot more clear too. Wherever you move to, there's no cutoff or
I,
anything.
I'm in motion right now.
Oh, never mind. That's the best connection. Is in motion.
Is in motion for some weird reason. It catches more when you're moving. You know this on the 93. We've
Oh,
seen that.
you changed the title screen. Okay, I was wondering why the screen changed on my end. You changed the 16 to 15.
Yep. Now, does anybody have any
No,
comments or
you didn't.
questions?
No, yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. I'm tripping.
Yeah, I changed it to
Yeah, yeah,
15.
yeah, yeah. I'm tripping. It didn't
You're
update
still
fast enough
tripping,
on my
but
side.
just not. So,
Go ahead, Thomas.
does anybody before he does anybody have any comments or questions?
Yeah, man. The text has been blurry this whole time, like pretty bad. Right now it's legible,
All
but
right,
I'm gonna just switch
Look,
over to my Bible. Give me 1 second, because it's gonna jump in and I already know.
that's
hey,
fine.
hey, Thomas. Does it look better now? Because it looks clear on my side now.
Does it? Let me check. Let me check. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. All right.
Well, like I said, it was a bad signal earlier, so now now
Well,
still it's actually doing well. So
still breaking
go
up a
ahead,
little bit
Thomas, when
though.
you're ready.
All right. I'll be reading Second Chronicles chapter 35, verses 16 through 20. Give you guys a couple seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So all the service of the Lord was prepared the same day to keep the Passover and to offer burnt offerings upon the altar of the Lord, according to the commandment of King Josiah. And the children of Israel that were present kept the Passover at that time, and the feast of unleavened bread 7 days. And there was no Passover like to that kept in Israel from the day of Samuel to the prophet. Neither did all the kings of Israel keep such a Passover as Josiah kept, and the priests, and the Levites, and all Judah and Israel that were present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. In the 18th year of the reign of Josiah was this Passover kept. After all this, when Josiah had prepared the temple, let me go to the forge real quick. Mm, Necho,
Oh,
Necho, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to
Try it
fight
again.
Necho.
How does it do it in the in the
NEK dash O.
any K. Oh, then that's just the K noise. Neko.
Neko.
He did that
Okay.
earlier. Yeah, he did that
Well,
earlier.
he said Neko, Neku, Neko. I'm like, make sure we get it right.
Right. Definitely. So I went to the so all right, Neko. After all this, when Josiah had prepared the temple, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish. Hold on, let me see. Carchemish.
Mish.
Oh, it's Carchemish. Okay.
Remember, whenever it has the I, what's the normal sound it makes?
The E sound.
Yeah, in the Hebrew at least.
Carchemish. Carchemish. Are you afraid? And Josiah went out against him. Okay. Taking it verse by verse. Going to read 16. So everything we have in regards to the service of the Lord is happening the same day, from keeping the Passover, burnt offerings upon the altar, all by Josiah's command. So all this is happening within that day. And 17, the children of Israel present. So they got the Passover going on, and also the 7 days of unleavened bread. Unleavened bread is flatbread, matzah.
Good.
So they still having a good old time. And then
Glad you had a
18,
matzah, but I wouldn't say flatbread. Only because flatbread has a meaning today. And flatbread does not necessarily mean it has no yeast. Like pita bread is considered flatbread,
true.
but there's yeast in pita bread.
All right, 18. Read this real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So they're pretty much talking about like how there never was a Passover like this before. All the way from the Samuel times, like nobody kept it like Josiah did. They really, hold on one second. Keep such a Passover as Josiah kept, and the priests and the Levites and all these Judah and Judah were present. So nobody did it like Josiah. Josiah different. like you said yesterday, who did it better, David or Josiah? Well, Josiah right here.
Yeah, based on what we're reading at the moment, yeah.
Yep. And then in the 18th year of the reign of Josiah was the Passover. So this happened in his 18th year of his reign regarding to the Passover.
Yep.
And 20, after all this, Josiah had prepared the temple. You guys said Nico, king of
Not Nico.
oh, sorry.
You are off today?
No, I'm not.
All right, we'll try
Neko,
again.
Neko.
There you go. Let's go for Netco. That was a
Oh,
dad joke for you.
1 second, guys. I read 20. After all this, Josiah. Okay, so now we have after Josiah had prepared the temple. Hold on, I don't want to just reread it. So Josiah finished preparing the temple, and then Necho, king of Egypt, comes up against Hold on. I don't want to butcher that again. Kamish
Good.
to sorry, guys, I got a phone call, even though I have do not disturb on. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Nego, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish. Great.
Yeah. Can't wait for the day where we're in person when we don't got to worry about that problem.
Exactly.
Where we have a building. That's going to be one of the best parts. Nobody can interrupt. Well,
Sorry,
I mean,
guys.
without just
I'm
being
still
outright
reading.
rude. You said what?
I'm still reading. Trying to get it
All right.
put into words. Nego, king of Egypt.
Oh, trucks use right 2 lanes. Okay.
So we have Nico coming up to fight against Carchemish by by Euphrates, and then but we have Josiah going out against him. I don't want to throw anything extra in there because it's not in the context. But I do got some questions.
Don't leave something out that is. Think about it. What is it you were going to leave out?
In regards to Josiah helping Carchemish.
Helping?
Hold on. Nico, king of Egypt, came out to fight against Carchemish. I mean, not
Don't add
Carchemish,
something
but
that's not
Nico.
there.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't even want to do it. I just gonna stop there.
Well, it should be straightforward. Think about the words in it. What does against mean?
Like versus.
Yeah. So is he helping him?
Nah, it's going against them. Like
Yeah.
it's the opposite of helping.
This is what I talk about when you guys about overthinking or screwing up your own selves. There's no way you could possibly say that he was trying to help Carchemish if you're actually looking at the context. There's no way for you to say that. It literally says the word against.
The reason why I looked at it that way because we have two different people here. Neko and Carchemish, correct? So I figured he was siding with one or the other.
After all this, Josiah had prepared to what? Had
The
prepared the
temple.
temple. Did it say that Josiah, when he after that, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish by
Right.
Euphrates, and Josiah went out against him.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
in that situation, so Necho came up against Josiah, went up against him. Who would the him be in that context?
Man, you breaking up bad, bro.
Oh, one more time. Who? Okay, so Necho came up against Carchemish.
Right.
So who would be the enemies in that part?
Neko.
Exactly. And then Josiah went up against him. So who would the him be
Okay.
in that context?
Neko.
Exactly.
See, I hit the
So,
wrong person. I was figuring it was one or the other. I should just read
well,
it better.
that's what I'm saying. Like looking at the context, we can look from that. There's no way you could say that he's trying to help Necho
Right.
because of the process if you look at it in its order. So, because if it was going to say that he was helping Necho, it would have phrased it completely different. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
Like it would have said Necho, the king of Egypt, came up against Carchemish and Josiah as well, or Josiah came up against him as well. There would be something showing up of inclusion. You see what I'm saying?
Definitely.
Now, is there a possibility that this is just Old Testament wording and it could mean the opposite? Yeah, it's possible, but it's so unlikely in this situation based on the way it's written. But it is a possibility. It's like that 5% possibility, though it does exist. So, in a situation like that, you don't just give up and say, I don't know. You say what the most likely is, but remember to put it as a possibility. There's like there's a majority chance. This is most likely, however you want to phrase it. We're like 90% sure, based on the context, that he is coming up as an enemy against Necho, based on the way it's written. So there is that small chance that it's not. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, how to phrase it? Don't just give up without giving an answer. If something has a likely possibility versus just an open possibility, you got to specify that because that makes a huge difference going into the next portion. So if we're going into the next portion, we see that there's a most likely possibility, and you got a lot of background noise, by the way, that the most likely possibility is that he's fighting against Necho, king of Egypt. When we look at it from that, now when we go into the next section, it adds context to the next section. But if we just say, oh, I don't know which side he's helping, now we're kind of leaving that doorway into a little bit less contextual soundness. You see what I'm saying, Thomas?
Yep.
All right. Now then, does anybody have any comments or questions about the second section? Now would be the time to raise your hand as I switch it to the last. All right. Then, Charles, go ahead when you're ready.
For this next section, I'll be reading 2 Chronicles chapter 35, verses 21 to 25. I'm going to give it a couple seconds. Verse 21. But he sent ambassadors to him, saying, What have I to do with thee, thou king of Judah? I come not against thee this day, but against the house wherewith I have war. For God commanded me to make haste. Forbear thee from meddling with God. Who is with thee, or who is with me, that he destroy thee not? Nevertheless, Josiah would not turn his face from him, but disguised himself, that he might fight with him, and hearken not unto the words of Necho from the mouth of God, and came to fight in the valley of Megiddo. And the archers shot at King Josiah, and the king said to his servants, Have me away, for I am sore wounded. His servants therefore took him out of that chariot and put him in the second chariot that he had, and they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died and was buried in one of the sepulchres of his father or fathers. And all Judah and Jerusalem mourned for Josiah. Keep saying the J. And Jeremiah lamented for Josiah, and all the singing men and the singing women spake of Josiah in their lamentations to this day, and made them an ordinance in Israel. And behold, they are written in the lamentations. Um, so the first thing in my section, the king of the Pharaoh king, the Necho king, he sends ambassadors to Josiah, telling them, "What are you doing over here? We're not coming against you. We're going against the what did we just read about? Carchemish. We're going against Carchemish. And God, God commanded me to go against Carchemish, not against y'all. Get out of God's business, so He doesn't destroy you." But Josiah doesn't listen. He disguises himself. He goes out to fight the Egyptians and Necho. They go to fight in Megiddo, but some archers actually hit Josiah and injure him, wound him. And I'm just gonna say it. Josiah just telling his servants, "Hey, get me out of here, get me out of here, get me to the chariot." They get him on the second chariot all the way to Jerusalem. His chariot slash ambulance didn't get him there in time. He died. And he was buried in one of the grave sites of his father. And it talked about Judah, Jerusalem. They were tearful. They were mourning for him. They were extreme sadness, tears, crying to the point where in all of this mourning they're singing about him after the death. Something we've seen. If you guys been to funerals, I've been to some ghetto funerals where after we carry the person, we put them in the ground, somebody singing some song that has. Now that I look back, the song has nothing to do with this person's death. It's just a song that comes off sad. That's a pretty good example I could do in this situation. And it's talking about their. Let me get to this last part. Oh, let me reread some. Let me double check something real quick before I end it. So their mourning and singing is written and they are written in lamentations. So the mourning and singing is written in I don't know what and written in lamentations. I wonder if that's like a book somewhere out of the Bible. That's interesting. Other than that, that's all I got to bring up in my section. Matt, did you hear that explanation?
I did. Now, a couple corrections. Sorry, I was dealing with some traffic. I got to multitask on this.
You
So,
good? You good?
anyways, one big thing that I would say is that lamentation, that's an English word.
I didn't
Look it
know that
up.
was an English word. I'll
Hmm.
go to the Strong's first, right?
Yes.
Primitive root to strike a musical note, that is, chant or wail at a funeral.
Now go into the English online.
Let me go to the. Make sure I spell it right. Mm. A passionate expression of grief or sorrow.
Exactly. A good example today of lamentation would be if a father's son had died and he was at the funeral, and it's the emotions that he feels. Lamentations are an emotion. It's
Let's
emotional
say
response.
when you're at that funeral and they're the loudest ones at the funeral. My baby, no, my baby. You mean like that?
Yeah, but no.
Okay.
So lamentation is the expression of the sadness through whatever you're doing. You're lamenting, your lamentation. So, for example, those ones that are always doing that extra screaming and stuff, a lot of times they be the first ones to get over everything. Like they
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
even they wasn't even really sad. It was a show. They doing it for a show. The people who are lamenting, the people who are doing lamentations, they're the type of that's like the people that are silent, or if they are singing, you can feel the passion of sadness that they have. It's not you're faking something.
Mhm.
Like the type of person who would be so super quiet, you have to check on them because you don't know if they're gonna hurt themselves. Like that's the level of sadness that it is. So
Okay. Thank you for that then. Okay. I can put that in my
like
notes
we're
then.
talking about deep depression. Lamentation, lamenting something is sort of like, if I were to explain it in a simple terms, it's like depression with regret, or depression formed from regret. It's specific to regretting something 99% of the time. So you can lament things that are not as sad, but it still has that extreme form of regret. So, like, for example, you build up your whole business, you put everything into it, and then somebody from a riot burns down your whole building. Are you
Yeah. Then
are
okay.
you feeling
Okay.
sadness? Yeah, but it's not just generic sadness. It's more in reference to regretting what you lost, wishing you hadn't lost it.
Mm.
That's more of what like lamenting is. Or and so if you're singing, if the singers are all singing with in lamentation, that's like when you hear a song, even on the radio, and they're singing about a sad subject. Someone who's lamenting, you can feel the sadness as they're singing. Someone who's not lamenting, you can hear the words are sad, but you don't feel it when you're listening to it. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So I would say that if you were to simplify it for your dictionary terms of the Bible, I would say lamenting or lamentation is regret to the point of extreme sadness.
To the point of extreme sadness.
Yes.
Got it.
Because lamenting, you don't just lament things that are like life and death. You lament losing things. Like lamenting could be used for that too. It's just like a
And it
regret to the point of an extreme sadness.
and it makes sense why they feel that way. We've read about Josiah doing all kinds of good things, even bringing back the Passover, which is funny they wasn't doing for a time period, and he's bringing that back, which
Yeah.
they should have been doing. But yeah, but what I wanted, the only thing I wanted to add, because you said there were a couple more corrections. In Second Kings chapter, if I can find it, in Second Kings chapter 23, when we read about it, it didn't say, like, it just said Josiah went against the king of Egypt and then he died. We didn't get the details like this about how
Yeah.
the king of Egypt said, hey, God has instructed me to do this, don't interfere with this, so you don't get stricken down, like you don't get struck down. And you did it anyway. Josiah in this one moment didn't say, you know what, if God told you to do this, I need to refer back and verify this with God,
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly. And what I was going to point out is your point of I wouldn't say correction. I said I'm going to work on. Sorry about that. I'm trying to work on using a bit different terms. Um, the difference between how it should have been explained. So, not a correction. It's not like you did something sinful, but like a point of interest to point out, to heads up. In this situation, you should have explained how, if this is God's will, that it showed him in a moment where he's not following God's will to dying in it. So
Oh, yeah, yeah, because then that would go with the point I brought up earlier with the king of Egypt talking about God told me to come out here.
yeah,
I could have put it with
and
that.
that goes into another part. There's a very important lesson that you should have brought up in that. The fact that Egypt is not the servants of God. They're not the children of Israel.
Hmm.
So if this is God's will, if the king of Egypt is not lying and God really put him up to do this, that brings into point three ways that it could be going. Maybe it was God's will to have this happen so Josiah dies before the wrath. Maybe this is Josiah actually going against God, which we saw this whole time he's been doing right by God. But now the enemy of him is not even an enemy at the time. They're not even coming against each other. But Josiah just wants the fight. Now, we don't know why he wants the fight, but he wants the fight. He's the one starting it when it has nothing to do with him. And so this is actually a moment that you didn't bring up. Josiah is going against God's will if this is true. Now, we don't know from our perspective if the king of Egypt is lying. We do know that it is God's will by the fact that it actually happened, but the king of Egypt could be lying about it, saying that God told him to do this. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, because in the last study we did talk about how God already, or no, 2 studies ago, how God already told Josiah that while you're around following my will and way, I'm not gonna, you're not gonna see the wrath that I'm bringing to the children of Israel.
Exactly. He literally said he was going to die in peace. Well,
Hmm.
if you got struck by a sword or a spear or any kind of weapon, did you die peacefully?
You didn't, but he kind of calls it on himself.
That's
He
the
would have if
point.
had he not gone. Had he not gone.
That's the point. So Josiah was doing so good at the beginning, and then at the end, he ended up doing against what God's will was. So
Yeah.
this goes back to track back what we said yesterday about like how at Josiah at the moment was the best example of somebody who is doing right by God. But there's one big difference in where we got to take that back now. And that's because David, at his last moments before he died, got right with God. He was doing right when he passed on, for the most part. But Josiah died as a result of doing something against God's will. And here, this is the interesting part too, is that the thing that Josiah did against God's will, David had done a lot of wrong. He got right with God, he repented, but we still saw David doing wrong throughout his life. Josiah had this one thing that he did wrong, but it just happened to be at the end. So, can we say that Josiah is still a better example of doing right by God than David is?
No,
Yeah,
not. Oh, yeah.
you could. You could, because unlike David, we don't have writings of all the times that Josiah did wrong by God. We have one time. But could you also come back and say that, well, actually, David was a better example of following God? Yeah, you could do that too. It kind of is a toss up now, because whereas Josiah was doing right until the last part of his life, David did wrong, did right, then wrong, then right, then wrong. He was in and out until he got right at the very end and he started passing on. But he did right and wrong, right and wrong, right and wrong. And so when we really look at it from that perspective, you could say it either way. It's kind of a toss up now. Although I still personally would probably say that Josiah was a better example because he had a lot less recorded instances of where he was going against God. Whereas David, shoot, David was back and forth with putting God first or putting relatives or putting like desires above God. Like he went back and forth with it.
Hmm.
So just a little side detail on that. Now, there is something I would say that is not something you needed to say, but just as an added side note. It could be possibly that this all happened so that God's will of Josiah dying before the wrath took place, because God knew what his weaknesses were and how this was going to play out. That could be a possibility as well. And we see that
Hmm.
even in our own lives. I mean, if you look at your own life, you see that there's a pattern. It's not a question. There is a pattern. But some of the problems that we cause in our life, even from our own sins, lead unintentionally, but in God's will, lead to some of the best lessons or best meanings of people that we could have possibly done. That if we hadn't made that, it wouldn't have happened. I'm personally, this is just me. I believe, or not, I believe, I'm starting to think, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm starting to think that the whole reason that Tremaine came back was so that I could get closure for the leaving without a cause. Because it really bothered me that he left without a cause. So Tremaine came back, but he came back in such a way that it's like, okay, you're not here right now and we're on Bible study. You missed yesterday. I might be wrong, but I think he missed 3 days in a row. I might be wrong though. So maybe the whole reason that he came back and from his lack of care of putting God first wasn't even about him. Maybe it was actually just so I could have a little bit of because I had a real problem with nothing even happened and you just dipped out. And there was a part of it, the question about harshness and being harsh and correcting. But being the fact that he hasn't even been corrected this time, really harsh, and he's missed so much, it has nothing to do with correction. At least at the moment, you're not putting God first. And the same could be said for Chris. How is Chris gone today? So when we look at it from the perspective of who's going to actually do right by God and we look at the perspective of why things take place, sometimes things take place so that we can make our mistakes and we can learn from it. That's true, don't get me wrong. But then there's other times where mistakes are made or things happen or people try to reconnect or what have you to prove something or to help something for those that are following. Like if Tremaine hadn't come back and had that statement about the harshness, if Thomas had had that harshness statement, I wouldn't have worked on the harshness if you guys hadn't spoke up about it. That was one thing that I didn't know was really a big problem because you guys never said nothing. The only times that you guys spoke up about it was at a time where it was actually necessary that I be harsh. But you never spoke up about how I was being too harsh when times were not even harsh. Like even the word correction. When I say I'm giving you a correction, I'm normally there, I use it for everything. But some people were taking that as a concept of sin or non-sin instead of just for everything. So that was something that needed to be spoken about that hadn't been spoken about until these situations took place. So even the times where we make mistakes and sin, like Josiah here, it may be that that's the whole reason this happened was so God, his thing would have been fulfilled. Because think about it this way as being this possibility. Thomas, if Josiah had done continued to do right and stayed right, is there a possibility that he be alive until something goes really wrong and he's there during the time of wrath?
Yep.
Yeah, there's that possibility. So in that situation, his even mistake could have been the part of God's will that would lead to him dying because he wouldn't have died so soon if not for that mistake he made. See what I'm saying, Charles?
There we go. I see what you're saying.
All right. So, with that in mind, does anybody have any comments or questions before we pray it out? Now would be the time to raise your hand. All right. Then, Charles, go ahead and unmute and pray us out.
All right, everybody, bow your heads if you can. Father, thank you for giving us this study with Josiah. Thank you for giving us the even all the way to the end of Josiah. And with this study, just like every other study, I pray that we can get these lessons in into our notes. We can get these lessons into maybe a self-reflection for the end of the day, and that we're well prepared for the next Bible study for tomorrow. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Oh, and Charles, do me a favor. My nephew wants to start studying. Can you text me the iPhone app that you use for the Strong's Concordance? The iPhone one that was like almost equal to the My Sword?
There
Hello?
we go. I'll find it and send it to you.
Okay. I was like, he just muted right after. Y'all have, I mean, that's a good habit to have, but that was the bad timing for that habit. All right, y'all. So go ahead and find that real quick and text it to me so I can send it to him.
I got you.
All right, y'all. Bye, y'all.